bit about where we're going. We have to think back to a time before the ice ages when water levels in the ocean were a lot higher than what they are today. And where we're driving right now was sitting under about 18 meters or 60 feet of water. The whole Yucatan Peninsula was a coral reef. During the ice ages, water levels in the ocean dropped and exposed this coral reef to the air. So when coral is exposed to air, of course it dies, and when it dies it turns into primarily limestone. So the whole Yucatan Peninsula, all the rocks you see around are limestone, and limestone is very porous, and whenever it rained during the ice ages, rain would mix with the vegetation matter sitting on the surface and become a little bit acidic. This acidic water would start to seep through the porous limestone and start carving out or eating out these rooms or these caverns. The water would settle to the floor of these rooms, start flowing to the lowest place, which was usually the ocean, and the flowing of this water would help to connect these rooms together into these large dry cave systems. Stalactites would form from the ceiling, stalagmites from the floor, from the deposit of minerals in the water dripping through. Some of these rooms became very large and the ceilings became very thin, and the ceilings collapsed. Where the ceilings collapsed, you now had an entry point to these dry caves. Early man lived in these dry caves, and we can still see evidence in the caves of some of that. Then about 10 to 12,000 years ago, water levels in the ocean rose up to about where they are now and flooded most of these dry caves. These entrances still exist. They are now the entrances to the underwater caves, and we call them cenotes. Cenote is taken from the Mayan word zonot, which means sacred place of water. And these cenotes were very important to the early Mayan living in the area here, because they're really the only source of water. When it rains now, the water still seeps through the porous limestone, flows through the underground caves to the ocean. So these windows of water were used for drinking, for watering plants and animals. And the Mayan also believed that some of their gods lived in the caves. So the cenotes were the entrance to where the gods lived, and sacrifices would take place there in the form of jewelry, pottery, and sometimes even human sacrifice. We'll be able to see evidence of that in some of the systems we visit. What is called a guided cavern experience. The word cavern in a dictionary is virtually interchangeable with cave, but in diving we differentiate the two and call the cavern the first part of a cave system. The limits of that cavern are such that we have to stay within 200 feet of an entrance, within areas that we can see light coming from an entrance, no deeper than 70 feet of depth, areas where we can pass side by side with another diver. So this would be in a sharing air situation, that you'd be able to exit the overhead environment together. We need to maintain a visibility of at least 50 feet. Okay? And anything beyond these limits now becomes a cave. So what we're looking at right here was once a big room. You can slightly make out the contours of the walls. The ceiling collapsed. The trees now are growing up on what was once the ceiling. Water would normally run through the middle of this room now, but with the ceiling in the center, water skirts around the side of it. Let's take a closer look. What we're looking at here is really a river. The water's coming from upstream here, flowing towards the ocean in this direction. This part under the overhang is still an active dry cave. When it rains, water drips from the ceiling and continues to form a cave. Under the water, the action has stopped, and we call it a dead cave. Entering this type of environment, we need to think about a couple things. The most obvious concern with this type of diving is the fact that we have a ceiling above our heads. In the open water, if we have a problem, we go up. In the caverns and caves, if we have a problem, we have to go out before we go up. So we have some different rules we need to follow because of that. There's a less obvious concern in this type of environment, and that is the bottom composition. In the ocean, we generally have a heavy sand. When we stir it up, it settles down to the bottom quite quickly. In the caverns and caves, we have a very fine silt. So if this silt gets stirred up, it can stay suspended in the water for up to 2 weeks. We need the visibility to find our way out, so we need to preserve it going in. We're going to have some different techniques we follow because of this bottom composition. First of all, let's talk about the ceiling above our heads. The first cave divers were open water divers, and they used a rule on air, which states simply that when you're low on air, you go up. So they went into the cave. When they got low on air, they turned around. They didn't think about the return trip, and they never made it back to the exit. The next set of cave divers were a little bit smarter. They used a rule of halves. Half their air to go in, leaving them half their air to come back. And that worked for a while until you had a diver with a little problem. It took a few extra minutes to get out, and now he didn't have the extra air to make it all the way up to the exit. We now use a rule of thirds. 1/3 for going in, 1/3 for coming back, and 1/3 for dealing with any problems. So it's normal to end these dives with a lot of air in your tanks, but keep in mind that we need that air to deal with problems in the overhead environment. In fact, another way you can look at that is that that extra third of air may not be for you. It may be for your buddy if he was to run out of air. With the bottom composition, we need to stay off the bottom and leave ourselves a buffer zone of maybe a yard or a meter. We also need to have the minimum amount of weight. If we are overweighted, our legs tend to drop. When our legs drop, the thrust of the fins are pointing downward, and that's going to stir up the bottom. We need to keep the minimum amount of weight in order to maintain our legs slightly upright so that when we kick, it's not going to stir up the bottom. We also have to be concerned with our buoyancy control. In the ocean, we generally have an easier time with it because we go down to depth, we stay there, and then we slowly come up at the end of the dive. In the caverns and caves, we have to follow the contour of the cavern or cave, and that means we may go up and down quite a bit more than we're used to. Anticipation is a real key. If you see that the cave is going down, you know you're going to need to add air. If you see the cave going up, you know you're going to need to release air. Your lungs can be used as a set of brakes as well. If you feel yourself crashing into the bottom, stop what you're doing, take a big breath of air, okay, and you'll have a chance to get some air in your jacket. If you feel yourself rising up to the ceiling, don't kick to come back down. That just fills your lungs up with air. Stop what you're doing, exhale, and you'll settle down slowly. It'll give you a chance to get the air out of your jacket. We need to talk about communication, and communicating in a cavern is similar to communicating on a night dive. We need to shine a light on our hands, okay? And just to make sure we're speaking the same underwater language, what does this mean?
Okay.
What does this mean?
Out of air?
Problem. Problem with your ears, okay? Problem with a piece of equipment. The other signals that we want to make sure we know: out of air, low on air, okay? And what does this signal mean?
Up.
Up. This
or
means,
out.
This means up in the open water. It doesn't do us a whole lot of good in this environment. So we change this signal, and this actually means out or exit. In fact, at any time, for any reason, any of us can give this signal. If we give this signal, we all exit the overhead environment and deal with the problem in the open water. Is that agreed?
Yes.
Okay. The other signal I want to introduce today is this. And this is going to be asking you how much air you have. Okay? And when I give you that signal, you're going to need to check your pressure gauge and make sure you are not at or below your turnaround pressure. So in the water before the dive, we're going to check our air. I'm going to assign you a turnaround pressure. For example, if you start with 3,000 psi, 2,000 psi would be your turnaround pressure. When you reach that turnaround pressure, you need to give me that signal indicating that it's time to go back to the exit. If I ask you during the dive and you are above that turnaround pressure, you can tell me you're okay. At or below that turnaround pressure, you can tell me it's time to exit. Another signal I'd like to introduce is this, and this is silt. Okay, so the signal, if I say to you, silt, I'm telling you that you are silting up the cave, and maybe you need to get off the bottom, you need to concentrate on keeping your legs up, or maybe add a little bit of air to your jacket. Another signal I'd like to use today is this, and this means hold. So just like in those army movies, you see the leader up in front on a patrol getting this signal, it means that hold. And what I'd like you to do when you see me give that signal is just hold onto the line and wait there. Perhaps I'm helping someone with equalizing their ears. Perhaps I just want us to stop and let another group go by. But when you see this signal, go to the line and just hold on. The equipment that we're using for this dive is your regular open water equipment. We do a few modifications to it. First of all, we don't wear a snorkel. That's just a place to get entangled in the line. So large knives on the legs. We don't want to wear gloves. If we need to follow the line, we need to be able to feel it. And we need to have less weight on than when diving in the ocean. The equipment that I'm going to be wearing is my cave diving equipment, and that just means redundancy. I have 2 tanks of air. Attached to those 2 tanks of air, I have a long 7-foot hose with a regulator on the end. If you're out of air, I'm the best guy to come to. I have extra lights as well. You're going to have 1 light, but if that was to dim or fail, you're going to come to me, and I'm going to give you an extra light and take away your old one. With your lights, they are mechanical switches, and if we turn them off, they may not want to come back on. During the dive, I need you to keep the light on at all times. I need to use it as a reference, and you need to have it available as a signaling device. If you want to look at the environment without the light, put it to your chest or put your hand on it, but don't turn it off. The light can also be used to give signals. To keep it simple for today, a circle with your light is going to mean okay. So I may ask you, are you okay? And you can respond, yes, I'm okay. If you want to get someone's attention, shine your light in front of their light. That's where they're looking. They'll turn around, and now you can tell them what you need to tell them with your light shining on your hand. We have a line connecting the place that we're diving in the cavern or cave to the open water. This line is to be used as a reference. We don't pull ourselves along on it, but in a poor visibility situation, we could follow this line and it would lead us back to the open water. Whenever there is a line where we're diving, we have the possibility of getting entangled in it. So this piece of equipment that's there to help us find the exit can actually hinder us from getting to the exit. We want to make sure that all our equipment is tucked in and nothing's dangling out that can get entangled in that line. We also want to make sure if we cross that line, we cross over it and never go under it. Okay? If we were to get entangled in that line, I have a knife. I could cut the line to allow us to exit. The environment we're going into is really a world frozen in time. The formations that we see in the caves and caverns here are more than 10,000 years old. Any damage done to them will be permanent. They will never grow back. The silt as well on the bottom has been there for hundreds of years. If we put our hand on the bottom, our handprint's going to be there for the next 100 years or so. We want to leave this environment the same way we found it in today. So one very simple rule, we're only going to touch the water. Okay? The open water environment that we see in front of us here is a living environment in that light is hitting the water, algae is growing, and we see some fish such as catfish, mollies, cichlids, guppies living in this environment. When we go into the cavern or cave, most light disappears and most life disappears as well. We do have some creatures though that live in entire darkness. There is small shrimp, little crayfish. We have something called an isopod. It looks like a little roly-poly bug. Remipede, which is similar to a millipede except it swims in the water. And we even have a blind cavefish, a fish that has no eyes. It lives its entire life in complete darkness. We are going into the cavern, so we're going between the darkness and between the light. So we're in the area that we can see virtually anything from the two environments. The environment here is a very small ecosystem on its own here. We want to protect it by making sure we don't wear harmful repellents or suntan lotion when getting in the water. So let's be careful of that. The dive that we're doing is entering in this direction here. In the water, you can see the start of the line. I want you to remember where that is now because that's going to be our reference point on the map I show you in a few minutes. Entering the water, we're going to walk down from the parking lot with all our equipment on, fins in your hand. You're going to step down using the rope to get yourself into the water. When you're in the water, you can put your fins on, but please stay on the surface until I'm in the water. I'm going to check to make sure that you've got your equipment tucked in. I'm going to make sure there's no bubbles coming from your air supply. I'm going to make sure that you've got the proper amount of weight on. We're going to discuss what your turnaround pressure is, and we're going to review some of the things we just talked about now. The reference point I showed you down below was right here. That's in the open water. That's the start of the line. This cavern system has 4 different cenotes. It has the points of light. It has the sugar bowl. It has Bill's hole. And the main cenote, Taj Mahal, where we're entering. The distance between any of these 4 cenotes is less than 400 feet. So the point in the middle is less than 200 feet of one of the entrances, meaning that we can always remain within the cavern zone of one of the entrances, and this extends the area of our dive. We have a permanent guideline. It begins in the open water as I showed you. It goes to the open water of the points of light. It continues to the open water of the sugar bowl and comes very near to the open water of Bill's hole. Comes back onto itself here, and there's another line which circles around. We now have 3 intersections. At the intersection, you're going to see a marker on the line. Okay, this is an arrow, and this arrow indicates the direction of the main entrance. If you needed to follow that line, following these arrows would take you back home. Let's think about the limits we have on the cavern. We've talked about penetration limit. Now let's talk about the depth limit. We need to stay above 70 feet of depth. This cavern has a maximum depth of 46 feet in this area here. So we're well above that depth limit. We need to stay in areas where we can see light coming from an entrance. The main entrance has very little light seeping in. The next entrance doesn't have that much as well. In fact, we just have these shafts of light which comes in through the ceiling. A lot of light comes from the sugar bowl cenote, and quite a bit from Bill's hole. At all times during the dive, we will be able to see light either in front of us or behind us, and quite often both. The furthest point of penetration. After that, it turns into a cave. We're going to see a sign indicating that point. It's a skull and crossbones. If we make it to this point before reaching our turnaround pressure, we're going to continue around this way back home. If we reach our turnaround pressure before reaching the sign, we're going to turn around and come back the same way we came. We are sitting about 3 kilometers from the ocean, and in fact ocean water is seeping through the porous limestone inland. Ocean water is heavier than fresh water, and hence it stays below the fresh water. Fresh water is lighter, it floats up above. The line that separates these two waters we call the halocline. We are going to pass through the halocline. It sits at a depth of about 40 feet. When we pass through the halocline, we're going to mix these two waters and things are going to get a little bit blurry. If you're right behind someone's fins, you're not going to see too much. You need to get your head to the side where you're going to be able to see the nice separating line, and it looks like oil and vinegar. Very spectacular. There's a tendency to get trapped in this halocline. The salt water buoys you up, the fresh water sinks you down. To get out of this halocline, exhale, you'll come down below it, or inhale, you'll come up above it. So we're here at Chacmol Cenote. This is the main entrance. The cenote is called Chacmol. There is a second cenote called Little Brother Cenote. Again, the distance between the two cenotes is less than 400 feet. In the middle, we remain within the cavern zone of one of these cenotes. In reality, the actual distance is about 150 feet. We have two permanent guidelines. One of them starts here to my left. It goes and makes a traverse all the way to the open water of the Little Brother Cenote. Another line begins in the Little Brother Cenote and ends in the open water of this cenote right here called Chacmol. We're going to start here at the Chacmol cenote on this line, which we call the spring line, meaning that it's upstream, so water is flowing in this direction here. So we begin going upstream. Eventually the line turns and starts heading downstream. It takes us about 17 minutes to reach Little Brother Cenote. If we haven't reached our turnaround pressure at this point, we are going to begin on the downstream line, which will take us back to our starting point here in Cenote Chacmol. The dive is going to pass through a halocline here, here, and again here. So 3 times we're going to see the halocline. We're going to see some very good evidence that this was once a coral reef. We'll see some fossilized shells, some conch shells inside the limestone rock. And we also get a very nice view of stalactites and stalagmites, some draperies in this area right here. We'll pass by an air dome. There is air above it. Just because there's air doesn't mean we can necessarily breathe it, but we will see it from down below. At certain times we're going to cover our lights. Very beautiful light coming in from Cenote Chacmol this late in the day. A little bit of light coming from Cenote Little Brother, but again, we're always going to see light either in front of us or behind us. We have some warning signs. There's a warning sign here indicating the entrance to the cave. There's a warning sign here. And there's a warning sign here. Any questions? Here at Dos Ojos Cavern, Dos Ojos means two eyes, and what we have here is the eastern eye, where we are right now, and again, the distance between these two cenotes is less than 400 feet. The point in the middle is less than 200 feet from one of the entrances, keeping us within the cavern zone. There are two separate lines on this dive. Let's talk about the first one. The line traverses between the two cenotes, beginning in the open water of the eastern eye and ending inside the cavern near the western eye. Very simple dive. We're going to follow the line until we get to our turnaround pressure. We turn around, come back the same way we came, all the way back to the open water. The problem is the beginning of the line is not completely in open water, it's very near, so I will string a reel to connect into the permanent guideline, and at the end of the dive I'll ask you to swim out in front of me before I collect the reel, ensuring that we all have a continuous line to the open water. The second dive runs parallel to the first line, continues over to the Bat Cave. The Bat Cave is not a true cenote. It's a open water room with a hole which allows light to come in from the ceiling. We're going to surface there in the Bat Cave, have a look at some bats hopefully, and drop back down again and continue on back. We have an intersection here. At the intersection we're going to see a plastic marker indicating our original entry point. Maximum depth on either of the dives are 28 feet or 9 meters. Visibility here should be near perfect. We have a higher flow here than anywhere else, and you'll feel that we're going upstream on both dives, so the current will take us back when we turn around. We are not going deep enough to see the salt water. We are about 8 kilometers from the ocean, and salt water is sitting at about 60 feet. We are only going to 28 feet on this dive. What we do have here is more decorations in the form of stalactites, stalagmites, columns, flowstones than any other system. Where the first one's here, we'll get in the water now. We'll see it in its best state.
Upase Devane Chevito